Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I am here with the lovely Vina, and y'all, we are here for something we have been waiting on. Y'all, first and foremost, I've been waiting on this book since the day Ladarian tweeted out for a pitch
Yep.
contest that he was writing about a magical HBCU. I was beyond ready for this book to come out.
Yeah,
Now,
you've been following him since the beginning, since the Black Hogwarts trend.
man, I've been on it. I saw this and I was like, now y'all know me. Y'all know I ain't even read Harry Potter. Y'all know I don't know nothing
I
about
haven't
that
read
little
it
white
either.
boy and his wand. I don't know nothing about him and his wand. I ain't seen the book. I ain't seen the movie. I don't know nothing about it. But good old Malik in Cayman University, you know, I wouldn't be mad if I got me a little acceptance letter from Cayman University. I ain't gonna hold you. I want to be in one of them little sparring classrooms, learn how to be out there on the football field with the professors and whatnot. You know, I enjoy my read of Blood at the Root. Now, for me, I will acknowledge a few things going into this conversation. Going in. But before we get started, I'll make sure that Vina can introduce ourselves for y'all who are on my channel. Again, I know we're both streaming on both of our channels, so everybody can get to see what we got going on. But I'm Cache. My channel is Shay with the Hobbies. I be reading, I be writing, I be creating. If that is something that you can get into, I am Shay with the Hobbies on both Twitch and YouTube. Come check me out. I write stories. You can find those in the description box as well.
All right, and my name is Vina. I go by Miss WOC Reader on both Twitter and YouTube. So I know some of y'all are here from my channel. Thank you for showing up. I had a lot of requests actually to do this video too. Like I had people a few weeks ago, are you going to talk about it? Are you going to talk about it? I'm like, yes, I'm waiting for Shay to finish the book because she wanted to have this discussion together.
Yeah, I know. I was like, the summer is a little rough for me, so I was like, I'm gonna pull it out. And I got it finished. And I listened to the audiobook. And so I will say that for me, that's where all my review is coming from is the audiobook. I am reading it physically now, but my review is from the audiobook experience. And I say that because I am first to admit that audiobook does give you a different experience than the physical book or the ebook can give you. But specifically because in this case, Ladarian and the production company, they gave you sound effects and things like that.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of different things going on in the audiobook that made it like a very good presentation and audiobook about audiobook experience. So I will make sure that I like get that out there that far. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I told everybody it was like listening to my godson tell me a story. And if anybody knows me, they know I have a 16-year-old godson. He is about to start his junior year in high school, and he's a football player. And I'm listening to the story, and I'm like, "Nah, this is my godson. This is my godson. This is definitely giving Jacoby Mackay right now. This is definitely giving my godson, and this is him calling me and talking about, okay, Mama K, I need to talk to you about this girl, like da 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 da." And I'm like, I can appreciate the way in Malik's dialogue and the dialogue of the students sounds like kids today. It doesn't sound like how I talk because I was rolling my eyes quite often. I was like, oh my God. Ooh. But after hanging out with my godson and his friend at the bowling alley, no, this how they talk. This how they talk with a lot of extra stuff going on and very flamboyant and just loud and extra and dragging out syllables and everything, but it was authentic and I enjoyed it. Like I enjoyed it. And like hearing that young man read and narrate,
Yeah,
not
because
hearing an adult pretend to be a kid, but actually hearing a kid get to be
yeah, that was an extra added bonus that they used a
great bonus.
young actor who is closer in age to Malik to do the audiobook. I actually read it physically first, well, because I had an arc in advance, and now I went back in and I read like the audio, and I was just like, it's a completely different experience. And I'd say for the people who are struggling with the way some of the dialogue sounds, because this is very AAV heavy, I would suggest that you try the audiobook. And it's interesting because we're seeing a lot of controversy around it on Twitter. And a lot of the controversy is giving me anti-Blackness. It's giving me anti-Blackness. It's giving me specifically anti-Black American and anti-Southern American, because there's a lot of line by line poking fun at the things people say. But then you have people who are from rural Alabama who are like, nah, this sounds like my auntie. This sounds like my cousin. This sounds like this. This sounds like that. I live up north, so it's a little bit different. But I know you live down south. And you've lived.
It was very, very realistic for me. Like, I was like, nah, this is how we talk. Like, I stream on Twitch a lot. There's not a day that I stream on Twitch that somebody does not make fun of the way that I say some word. Every single time. Someone makes fun of the way that I pronounce something because of how my accent is. And I'm not even Southern. I'm more Midwest Southern, right? Like, I'm more Oklahoma, Texas Southern than I am Alabama, Mississippi Southern. So if it's there for me, it's definitely gonna be there for somebody from Helena, Alabama. Like that's gonna be there. And I just appreciated that it was like, no, this is real. And I've said numerous times, I feel like there can be the mismatch of, well, it gives caricature. And I have said, and I've tweeted this out, there is a level of responsibility on ourselves as readers we have to take when audiobooks are made available to us, right? And I'm not saying you have to go buy it, because I didn't buy the audiobook. I bought the physical book, but I definitely got the audiobook from my library. And Ladarian will be one of the people to tell you, requesting books at your library is definitely great for authors as well. So it's not like he's going to be the author to be like, don't request my book at your library. Like, no, request that audiobook at the library and get that audiobook experience. Because if you were reading it physically and it was making you feel a way, right? Take that audiobook and see if that doesn't change your perspective a little bit. Because the only person who has any control over the voice that you hear in your head reading the story is you.
But also, like, ask yourself why it's making you feel a type of way as well. Because that was another thing I was noticing, that people were like, oh, this sounds like this sounds like this, and bringing up every Southern person they can think of. If you automatically associate Black and Southern with Tyler Perry, that's an issue. And I mean, today's not the day we're going to have that discussion, but Tyler Perry initially was speaking to a very specific Southern audience with his work. That's why it was so relatable in the beginning, before he started falling into archetypes like over and over, and just like the same type of trite dialogue over and over. But initially with his plays, it spoke to a lot of older Black women.
A specific audience. There was an audience that made him the millionaire that he became. Like, we have to be honest about that regardless, right? Like, it wasn't white women who were buying out his plays. That wasn't who it was, right? It wasn't Black men buying out his plays, right? And if we're gonna talk about these things, right, like, there were a lot of Black women who did not see the portrayals of the women in those plays as negative, because they saw themselves in there. They saw representation, right? Like, they saw real life stories of themselves being portrayed on the stage. It made them feel seen, right? Like, that's the first thing before you even get to the story. The author's note is about making Black boys feel seen.
And it was interesting to me, I saw some women critiquing the author's note, and I'm like, how are you going to critique his thoughts on the representation he saw for himself? Because he's told this story a few times, but I just want to break it down for you. He said in 2020, he went to Barnes & Noble. He went to the YA shelf. He was used to reading those types of stories. He was looking for Black boy fantasies. He saw none. The clerk came over to help him, was looking for Black boy fantasies. He saw none. think about it critically. How many Black boy fantasies do you remember coming out in YA traditionally published in 2019 or 2020? You probably can't think of any because they weren't there.
One Black book with a boy on it that then came out. I can only think of one. The first and only Black boy book that comes to mind is The Taking of Jake Livingston.
And that did not come out in 2020. That was 2021. And it's not a fantasy.
It's not a fantasy. It's not in that time frame. That's what I'm saying. Like, I can't even think of it. And the older Black boy books that I'm thinking of, they're not written by Black men. So it doesn't even pop into my head to say them because Nick Stone ain't no man.
And that's not fantasy. It's contemporary, and it was a very specific type of contemporary. Right. So it was interesting to see so many people be like, no, that's absolutely wrong. There were books by Black women. We're not talking about the books by Black women.
We're not talking
and if we do want to talk about the books by Black women that do feature Black boys as another POV, a lot of times I'm finding that they're very similar. And if we're talking about just being critical and examining the way in which we see men write about women, we need to also talk about the way in which women write about men. Because
if Alexis is a Flat character, then what's this little boy named? Jamal? What's these boys from Ashes, the Golden Wings of Ebony? They Flat. Oh boy, like, what are we talking about?
Like, I was actually noticing that issue heavily last year. I was having conversations with author friends about it. I had heard educators talking about it. They're like, I can't find any books for my Black teenage boys in my high school class. And people were saying, well, they can just read the women. And like, yeah, they can just read the women's books, but they're not actually seeing themselves in there, especially when we're only getting one type of Black boy depicted. Like a lot of times the Black boys have to be very gentle and quiet and soft. And I see that over and over again. And it's interesting when I see women come into those stories and they're just like, oh my gosh, we never get Black boys like this, that are quiet like this, that are so cute, like a sweet cinnamon roll. I'm like, no, it's literally every book lately.
Right.
You don't really get too many where the Black boy has a little bit of swagger. Like the only thing I can think of as far as fantasy wise recently is actually this right here, which is Sign of the Slayer. This one is by Sharina Harris, and it came out last year. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it. It is a Southern Black fantasy. So it's another great one to put in the conversation where we're talking about we need more Black American fantasy. I have not seen the same fanfare for this one. And granted, it did come out on a smaller publisher, but if we're promoting ourselves as Black fantasy influencers, we do need to talk about the fantasies that aren't being pushed by the big five, that maybe aren't all over the timeline, because this one is actually a pretty good one and one of the more realistic voices that I found for both a Black boy and a Black girl that reminded me of the people who grew up around me who aren't the ones who went to white schools their whole life and weren't around people who look like them. Because that's an audience that needs representation as well. And if we're talking about Black fantasy, another one that comes to mind that not a lot of people have been talking about, well, actually I haven't really seen anybody talk about, is this one right here, Neverate by Shakir Rachon. I've been telling people for almost a year now to pick up this one. It has some similar vibes to Blood at the Root as far as we have a Black boy who lives in the South who is entering a new school. This one, I'd say, is more like if you're like a Marvel superhero type of fan, and he has that similar kind of origin story. And there's like a romance in here as well, where he is very connected to this girl at his high school and he's not sure why. But this one is an excellent one to pick up. And if we're talking about supporting Black boy fantasy, it's one you should go ahead and pick up.
For sure. I concur. It's definitely, when you posted that it was in $6 on Amazon.
Because I had looked at yet again.
I can afford that. Because the other part of conversations, these are expensive. These are expensive, yo. So I'm all for go to your library, request at your library, make sure that they are getting this, so that you're not the only one reading these stories, so that little black boys can go into the library and see, oh wow, we do have a fantasy book with a boy that looks like me on the cover. I think
and specifically not just about the black boy on the cover, but also having a black cast. That's a very important part of the conversation as well. So a lot of people are upset because Ladarian frequently speaks on a lot of black work centering the white gaze. If you actually follow him, you'll realize he actually doesn't talk a whole lot about books on his page. He also works in the film industry, and he is also a playwright. He often talks about things that are happening in plays. Today, everybody wants to have the conversation about Michael B. Jordan and producing Fourth Wing. He's already spoken about that and spoken about how a lot of these black studios are acquiring white books while rejecting black writers, and not just even ones who are presenting them with books to adapt, but just black stories in general that they're writing that are original and coming to them. That's something he's been very vocal about. So it's interesting to me when people were saying, oh, don't read Blood at the Root, read Legendborn. I don't care who has a problem with it, because I've been saying this since 2020. There are ways in which that book centers the white gaze. There are ways in which Bree has to shrink herself to fit into that environment. And people will say, well, you're saying I can't be blackety black in a white space? No, yes, I'm saying you cannot. And we know that because we have to code switch when we're in those white spaces. We cannot be our full authentic selves in an all-white space. There are just things you would not say around white people.
Literally, that's what people's argument is about why Kamala doesn't have to say America is a racist country. We know it's a racist country. She just needs to play the game. Like, we know these things. They do exist. Like, why? It just, to me, it's like all of a sudden, a black man with a story about a black boy comes into the picture, and all of a sudden we're obtuse about things that we clearly understood when it was black women writing black girls, but now all of a sudden we don't understand. Like, I will see threads of, I want black girls that kill and murder, and I want black girls that tear the world apart and set the world on fire and make no apologies for it. But we're mad about a black boy noticing that girls are wearing less clothing. We're mad that he's noticing that a girl is twerking on him of her own free will. He didn't cover, right? Like these are things that we're complaining about. Like, truly, like how do y'all want messy black girls, but then aren't he's not even being messy. He's not calling anyone a slut. He's not calling anyone a whore. He's not saying you're dressed like you're asking for it. He's not doing any of those things. Literally, scantily clad is probably the most rated G way of saying anything. Hey, y'all know I got two little munchkins over here. They like to get a little rowdy. Like truly think about the things that we are getting upset with him about, right? Like, nobody talks about him stealing a car in the beginning of the book.
That's another thing. That's an internal thought. That was not a thought that came out of his, that was not something that he verbally expressed. And it's interesting because when I read a lot of YA books written by women, they objectify the boys. Like, I've read ones many times where it's like, he is so beautiful, and it just goes on and on about his looks and how he looks like he is a grown-ass man, even though I can tell he's barely 18. And I'm like, what are we talking about?
Right.
So it's very interesting to me how we don't want to let a boy have his thoughts about a woman being or like a girl his age being attractive. That like, what's going on there?
Right. He's not saying, oh, she looks like she'll let me bend her over and da da da. Like, these are not the thoughts that he's having. And for me, it's like, the representation that I don't think people are getting right is, for me, I was in foster care. I did live in children's shelters with other kids who we are torn away from our families and couldn't call them. So when people are like, I just don't get this insta love, I don't get this connection, da da da, you don't, because you probably have been with your whole family your whole life, or been with people that you know. But when you are torn away from everything that you've ever known, and then you are put in a position and you find somebody that, because when you live in children's shelters and orphanages, you are with these same people every single day. You wake up, you eat your meals together every single day. You leave in vans to go do activities every single day. These are the only people you are allowed to converse and talk with every single day, Sunday to Sunday. You develop relationships that are way more close than just somebody you went to school with. This isn't just somebody he saw Monday through Friday for 5 hours in class. This is somebody that he saw at night. Somebody that he climbed to the roof of a building and talked about dreams. Like, are y'all real? Like, y'all aren't allowing children to be children. It's not even about boys to be boys. Like, y'all aren't thinking. The story shows you that he doesn't have any parental guidance or strong parents for a whole decade of his life. You get even more information that literally his entire life as the story continues, but we'll just go for the decade. But y'all are expecting him to act like people who grew up in houses with at least one parent that told you how to approach people and told you how you're supposed to build friendships and engage. Like, I don't think you guys are using your brain. You're supposed to be uncomfortable with the thoughts that he has. You're a fucking adult. He's gonna be comfortable. He's a child. Like, he doesn't know any better. He doesn't know that maybe scantily clad. I don't even think it's a bad thing to think. Like, she's scantily clad. Oh my God.
Honestly,
He didn't say,
oh my God, descriptor, because he didn't mention nobody's titties. Right. He didn't mention nobody's ass looking extra fat in their jeans. And that's what you would have heard in real life in that type of situation. Like, again, this is set in college. At a Black college, this was a Black party. Even if you didn't go to an HBCU, if you went to a Black party in college, there were a lot of them like this. One that we saw depicted in the book, there was a lot of twerking. I did a lot of twerking back in my day.
Man, was dancing on a lot of people in college. What are we talking about? And I wanted to hear, hey.
Yeah, that's very realistic.
That's the reaction we're trying to get. What are we saying?
Let me tell you, like, when I was in college, like, when they used to turn on that dance hall music, we'd see guys lifting the girls up. I saw this big girl get lifted up, and
slow juking would end our club night, so everybody knew what type of dance she was doing to end the night. Like, bro, like, let's be real with what we're talking about. Like, we literally, the music that they listen to, like I was saying when we were in Discord, like, Glorilla is literally, I'm in a crop top and some biker shorts. I'm showing off my moose knuckle. Like, if that's what they're listening to.
They're listening to Ice Spice. She a baddie. She's showing her panty.
Right. Like, literally, like, what are we talking about?
And there were teens up in that Ice Spice video dancing.
I just need us to be like real, right? Like, if we're gonna critique stuff, let's critique the fact that he went and stole a car in the first chapter, but you walking through the neighborhood and you're like, I understand that I could end up on a t-shirt and da da da. So the sense that it made to steal the car after you had to fight these people don't make no sense. But did one review mention this? No, not a damn review mentioned it. Not a damn review mentioned it. But y'all mad about twerking? Like, let's be real.
Yeah, like the first few chapters were interesting. Like, I can understand if people said they couldn't get into it, Act 1, just because it moved at a very slow pace. For me personally, I am one of those, let's just jump into the action. Like, I know there's a lot of back and forth information as to how you should start a book. Like, even with the one that I'm writing right now, that was feedback I got early, like, where one of my partners was like, oh, you just jumped immediately into it. I'm not used to YA books where we just jump immediately into it. I'm used to like, you have to set up the before and show us how they live their normal life first and then have something happen to them and then they move to this new place. And I'm like, no, you don't really need to know what this character is like before. For my particular story, like, we're just going to jump right into it and you're going to experience the new things the way she's experiencing the new things.
And we've talked about this before, just like in general spaces, but in some of the writerly conversation seasons that me and Britt have had, we've talked about a lot of this comes from that good old Save the Cat and the way that tells you how to tell a story. And it does lead you to do that. Like, you have the like pre whatever before that gives you what happens, what their day to day is like, and then what happens that changes their day to day, and da 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 da. I don't know. I ain't read the book. I just know the general consensus of how it's supposed to go, because we can read so many books that follow this formula that have come out in the last 5 years that do this exact same thing. And again, this is not a knock to Ladarian, because y'all know me. I'm gonna give debut authors grace. This is your first one. This is your very first one. This is your first foray out there, and not necessarily like this is the first thing he's ever written or anything like that, because I know he's a playwright.
And that's another thing too. People are making the assumption that this is the first attempt he's ever had at a book ever.
Right, and I know that that's not it.
He's not actually passionate about being an author.
Right, no.
When he said he tried before, and then he wasn't like getting anything from it, which happens to a lot of authors. And then and then he decided, you know, I'm like hearing a lot of like things about people needing this type of story, but they're saying I should turn into a book. I should turn into a book. I saw the other day somebody gave a writer advice. They were saying, oh, you know, I'm having trouble in Hollywood as a Black writer. I'm ready to give up and on. And somebody's like, don't like just let go of your passion for writing. They're like, have you tried writing a book?
Right. No, switch to something else. Like one of my best friend and critique partner, Betty C. Smith, she started writing screenplays. That's her love, because she loves TV and film, and that's what she wants to do. But she switched into books because it was so much harder getting into the film the way that she wanted to. But that's still her first love, and it makes it easier writing a screenplay first to write the book the way that she wants to do. So there's a lot to be said about having that, because again, screenplays, you kind of just getting down to, hey, this is the actual story and what needs to happen. There's not a lot of fluffiness.
Yeah, like clearly everything in here was not in the original screenplay.
Exactly.
And for the record, he started writing this screenplay back in 2020. He's shown pictures of like time stamped of it. Again, Shay was following him when he initially blew up on, there was a Black Hogwarts trend that took off on Black Twitter. I remember comedian Mel Mitchell also came up off of that. That is still her most popular TikTok video. So it's interesting to see people nitpick at that as well, because this is marketed as like a Black Hogwarts. He doesn't really talk about Harry Potter other than one mention in the book that just says this is like a Black Hogwarts. That's a nod back to that trend that he got, that his pitch went viral off of, that people still reference today. Like, I've never read HP. I don't know the thing about it. I literally could not tell you what the plot is of that. I think I saw the movie years ago, but I was bored the whole time watching it, so I wasn't really paying attention. But it's one of the best-selling books of all time. It is a mainstay on the children's hardcover list on the New York Times. Tons of children pick it up and read it every day. It's taught in schools. We have booktuber educators and booktuber librarians who will tell you that they, even if they feel a type of way about that series, they're not going to deny a kid from getting it, because that book is a book that gets a lot of people into reading. And we know a lot of our favorite authors have a love for that book. So while they hate the author and they're broken about the horrible things that she has said, they still have an affinity for that book. A lot of people don't talk about the book publicly anymore, but they're damn sure is still on their shelf.
Right. No, because definitely there was somebody who was critiquing the book and they had like Raven Puff in their bio. And I was just like, girl, go touch grass. Like, really, like, shut up. Like, stop. Like, I just make it make sense. I feel like this. I have said this so much. because so many people that I have seen critiquing the book didn't finish it. And y'all know me. Y'all know me. I will stick through a book because I want to be able to piece together everything that I do not like about it. So if I don't care if it starts off horrible, I'm getting to the end of it. I'm getting to it so I can give you point by point. This is where you fell off at. This is where you lost me at. So for like people to get there, I only made it 91 pages through. Well, baby, you can't tell me nothing about the story. This is a 400-page book.
Yeah, that was interesting too. To see an author, like, because I don't really care if authors review or not, like, you're allowed to have your opinions, but for you to give a 1-star review on a book that you said you only read 91 pages of, and you're like, I didn't read this part, but allegedly it has X, 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 and X. Well, how do you know if you didn't read it? I've seen a lot of people who are writers jump in the conversation and jump on the bandwagon and want to lead the conversation really about the book. And I'm like, you didn't read it. You've told us multiple times now you have not read it. You maybe read the excerpt. You maybe read chapter 1. You didn't get past chapter 2. So how are you telling me the X, 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 and X is in the book? And again, we talked about the language that it uses, specifically the type of AAVE. Well, it actually gets like all those references are lesser the further you get into the book.
Right.
Like a lot of the pop, like, because I'm a person who I say it in every single YA. I even said it in the other ones that I showed earlier. I critiqued every single one of them for the pop culture references. I'm somebody who thinks like pop cultural references can date your book depending on the types that you use. And I did critique this one specifically for having some ones that I feel were more millennial, as I critique a lot of YA contemporary stories, not just fantasy, but regular contemporary stories about having a lot of dated pop culture references. And I actually had an author DM me about that before. I never said anything about HP references in my review, but she's like, I'm still going to use my HP references anyway. I never said that in my review. I critiqued the other stuff that felt like pop culture from my teen years.
Yeah.
That she heavily used throughout the books, like which included children listening to CDs, which they didn't even do that when I was a teen.
Yeah, I think for me, I think the pop culture references didn't bother me as much because, like I said, my godson and his friends, like, they use pop culture in their day-to-day conversation all the time. Like, I'll be like, what are you talking about? You ain't never seen this TikTok? You ain't seen this video? You don't know it? And like, I'm sitting there going through a list of videos to understand stuff they're referencing or they're giggling about, or it's an inside joke. And it's not an inside joke. It's popular culture for them. I'm not in it because I'm not on TikTok. I'm grown. I don't, not to say grown people can't be on TikTok, but it's not an app for me. I'm not gonna be on there, right? Like, if I get a child, if my godson come out here and is visiting me, I get a TikTok to watch what he doing. But like, no, y'all can have that. I'm gonna stick with my millennial Instagram and Facebook and just call it a day.
And the thing is, so I am one of the people who actually did read Black teen books as a child. Like a lot of Black YA authors I see coming into the space now go, this never ever existed when we never had Black books when I was a teen. And I'm like, you and I are the same age, or actually you might be a few years older than me. We definitely had them because that's what I was reading from my library circa 2006 through like early 2010s. I was reading a lot of Kimani True, Daphina, which is an imprint of Kensington, also had a line of teen books that they used to put out. So my library had them all because it's a city library, and they would be right on the front shelf where you could easily access them, because even though my librarians were white, they realized those were the type of patrons that were coming into the library. And a lot of those are full of references to Chris Brown and Sammy and whatever type was the pop culture thing that was important that year. 106 in Park. There were a lot of Black kids who are really interested in doing things like DJing and rapping and dancing. A lot more of those books were set in these urban areas, which is like the opposite of now. Because let's be honest, we don't write for the Black child who lives within the city most of the time.
No, we don't.
Unless they live in New York City, we don't write about Black children who live in cities. A lot of books, even if they are set outside of New York, they tend to go more nondescript in the area where to make it, I guess, more palatable for a wider audience to relate to. But then that becomes an issue because a lot of these kids are looking to see themselves in these books and they're not finding themselves. And we're also saying, well, you Black hood kids, your story is not important. It doesn't matter if you get representation because y'all don't even read anyway. Well, yeah, they don't read because they don't have books that interest them. And I was telling somebody about this before, but there was a series when I was a teen called Drama High. After a while, I'm like, I'm tired of this hood mess with her back and forth with these boys and her ghetto friends, and I stopped reading it. However, like a few years later, I looked at interviews from the author and I understood like she majored in African American studies. And one of her goals for that series was to appeal to inner city Black children who were struggling to find an interest in books. So just because this book did not appeal to you and you felt it was too ghetto or too hood or too country or too this or too that doesn't mean that there aren't children in those spaces who it'll appeal to.
No,
that just means you're not the target audience.
I completely agree because as I was reading, like, and I'm a lot newer into the reading space, like comparatively speaking, right? And so I've been getting put on the books that, y'all have been recommended to me, like, hey, check this out. And so the two hood books or books with anyone entering the hood or dealing with the hood would have to be the Wings of Ebony duology and then White Smoke, right? Would be the two where there's supposed to be like a hood atmosphere. And in both situations, it was like this negative thing, one, and both main characters were not hood, they were hood adjacent. And so as the like resident hood reader in our group, I'm just like, I guess like this just feels really disrespectful, like to me. Like, why? First of all, no, we're not all like that, and I can talk however you need me to talk, but I can also code switch and move however I need to. I'm not stupid just because I came from the hood. Why can't y'all show other aspects of this? And when we get these other stories, it's like y'all put people in predominantly white spaces as if like predominantly white spaces are the only spaces where we can go where we don't fit in. Like, no, Malik didn't fit in at KMU. Like, a lot of the people at KMU came from places of privilege.
Yeah, and as somebody who in the hood but got bused to the suburbs to a white school, but then went half the day to the VOTEC that was back in the hood with the hood children, I had a very different experience. I didn't always fit in either. Like, I did not fit in at my white school, but then there were some ways when I was in class with the children from my neighborhood that I also didn't fit in, and I had to navigate that as well.
Right. And I feel like there are things that like we say that we want to have conversations about and that we want to see. And this book is doing just that. And then it's like, well, wait, like we say we want to see more Black families. We say we want to see more things with intergenerational. We get a whole fight scene with a grandma and a grandson. Like, I can't think of anything else where I read that and I was so engrossed in this fight. Literally, we've been reading books with fights chapter after chapter, and I'm like, I ain't picked this book up in 3 years because I was falling asleep reading the fight. So like,
and like, this isn't the first Black boy college book I've read. Like I said, we don't get very many, so the only one that I can think off the top of my mind was I read First Semester by Cecil R. Cross II. That was, again, back in the early 2000s that one was published. So it's telling that we're not getting those types of stories years later. We can barely pick out those types of stories.
But remember when we had the conversation about people talk about we're getting black shows now, and I said no, we're just starting to get black shows. We had black shows when we
and
were
then they went away. They were getting canceled.
They went away, right? It's the same thing. We had black books when we were younger, and they disappeared. And now we're seeing this resurgence, but this resurgence is kind of like the black shows we're getting a resurgence of. They black-ish. That don't shoot the messenger. Like they're black enough. They're enough that there's a group of people that feel seen, but there's a lot of us that don't.
And that's a discussion, like we see a lot of the critiques about Blackish online.
Right.
And I watched every season of Blackish. Now I will say that last season was just the most boring season of the show. It was definitely better early on. But I see people all the time talk about, that doesn't represent me, that doesn't represent me. But then they also bring up all these hood shows or hood movies that are non-existent. Because I'm like, when is the last time we've had a big hood movie?
When is the last time we've had a hood movie? Like,
truly. I'm not talking about those low budget movies on TV.
We're talking about like a hood movie that came, and not like a hood character, not a hood character, but a hood movie. The closest thing was Dope, and that was 2015. That's the last time I can think of one, and Dope, and that was 2015.
But let some people tell it, oh my gosh, it's just stereotype after stereotype in these books and stories. What is the last hood book that you read is what I have to ask some people, because a lot of people have a stigma against urban fiction and they've never picked up one a day in their life.
They've never read one. So then what is the problem? What is the issue? My thing for me is, like I said, like I don't think this book is perfect, but I think this book is valuable. I think this book is needed. The entire time I felt this like sense of kinship with Malik. Like I could understand a lot of what he was feeling. Now there were things that I didn't understand and things that like I had to like deal with myself, right? Like, cause like again, like my grandma, for those of you who don't know me, my grandmother raised me. So I lived with my grandma my entire life. Then I was put in foster care and I ended up like Malik getting emancipated myself and like living on my own and graduating high school, doing pretty much like Malik's story, like low key. I did have a foster sister that like we did not live together long, but she was like my sister, right? Like I have people that we lived in shelters together and we were only in shelter for like a month, but I'm the godmother to her son. Like those relationships, because of those traumas that you're going through at those times, those bonds are strong because of what you're going through. And so like when I'm watching the critiques of these things, I'm just like, it sounds very much like people who have never went through things. Like y'all are looking at this from the standpoint of people that grew up in a house with at least one parent. Like the way in which someone was like, he's homophobic because of his reaction to his roommate. I don't know if you have ever walked into a room you were gonna stay in and
like we can actually pull up. I highlighted it. We can actually pull up that scene right now.
I don't know how you reacted to somebody having sex and you didn't know what was going on. Like, I just need people to like be honest about the whole context of the situation. Like, he wasn't rude. He didn't call him a slur. He didn't say, "Oh my God, I gotta deal with a gay dude." Like these weren't the things that it was. He was like, "Oh, okay, that's not what I expected," but we moved. Like,
because when he first gets, so in the scene, he goes in the room, he hears sex, loud sex happening. He doesn't even want to go into the room he thinks is his, just because he doesn't want to see nothing when he opens the door. Then old dude comes out and is saging him down, like talking about how he has weird energy about him that he needs to like release.
And mind you, he's like half naked, right? Like he got his shirt off, like look at right. He's half naked, saging you down right after sex. Right after sex. and you know this has just happened. This ain't no shower, ain't no nothing. We're black people, right?
And then
So
his
let's be
booty
honest.
call comes out, and they start hardcore making out, and he literally says, "It's awkward." And then he asked him, he says, "So you an old dude?" He said, "I asked trying not to sound ignorant." So he was trying to think carefully of what to say to not offend him. He says, "I like what I like," D-Lo says back defensive. "That ain't going to be a problem, is it?" And he said, "It ain't even like that, bruh. Plus, I'm just here temporary."
I'm trying to understand what reaction y'all expected. So then in somebody's comment, someone was like, no, that just means that people didn't trust him to act like that. Okay, let me explain something to y'all, because I don't know how many of y'all have been in foster care, but let me just explain it to y'all, right? So when I lived in children's shelters, we were not allowed to go to school. We had to stay in the shelter we were in. Someone came to the shelter and gave us worksheets that were supposed to be appropriate to what we did in whatever age group we were in. So we weren't really socialized with a bunch of other people. So let's do that first of all. Okay. So then we also know early on he was in at least 1 to 2 abusive foster homes. We know one for sure, right? I just need y'all to use some cognitive fucking thinking real quick.
Like, and it's good that you mentioned that the foster care home was abusive, because people skipped over that. I saw a lot of critiques about him taking Tay away from, they're like, he took Tay away and he put him in this dusty house. I'm like, with the man who was beating him, and it said, and because that whole beginning of it actually reminds me, I said, of the show Star. It was a show on Fox. It's on Hulu now. It was by Lee Daniels. It's a spinoff of Empire, and it follows 3 girls who are trying to like form a singing group to become famous. And so, in the first episode, Star has to go back and to this foster home and break her sister out. She goes to pick up her sister, because it's the first thing she does when she gets emancipated is go look for her sister. She goes and sees that this foster father is molesting her sister as soon as like the other kids and the mom leave the house. She goes in and she starts fighting the man, steals his car, and then they take off.
It for me was just like, I don't understand how y'all are like missing key important details, right? Because these are all things that like would inform how he makes decisions and how he knows right from wrong in whatever context right from wrong is. Like, y'all are making so many assumptions about things that's like, but we have a lot of evidence to show us that actually this might not really be the case. So like, why? It just is weird to me.
And then later in the story, Tay talks about how much happier he is living in the house with Grandma Aya and them. He even gets himself a little girlfriend. And he has things he's passionate about. Like I talk at least a lot about, I want more stories where I understand that the kids have hopes and dreams and hobbies and different things they want to accomplish. And I don't get a lot of that in the YA books. And I feel like the children really do deserve that. Like, because we're not usually one track hyper focused on one issue at that age. We have multiple things going on in our life.
And I feel like that's something that Ladarian made clear in his book. Tay said it to Malik. Samity says it to Malik. They say, we want you to be a kid. We want you to be happy. We don't want you to just take on the whole weight of the world.
His roommate says, I'm tired of you being in the room, like straight from class every day. Come on out and join us.
Right. Like, the reason a girl is twerking on you is because your roommate wants you to get out and stop focusing on trying to figure out what's going on with your mama and all this other stuff. Like, come on. So this is the thing that I've been trying to understand. And I don't know if
that's what I'm trying to understand as well.
I don't know. And so I feel like I need to put a spoilers thing, because this is what's weird to me.
And the thing is, stop enabling white women to specifically talk about the misogyny in this book. Like, they're like, I'm white, so I really don't have the context about the culture, but I think this is misogyny.
No,
again, you're white, you don't have the context about the culture. How are you speaking on it?
Context, then don't say it, because this. So I don't think this is misogynoir. I think at the most this is all elitism, because it's not. She's fighting for a black girl, but she's fighting for people with non-magic. Period. It just happens
and
to be
that
a
comes
black
up
girl
multiple times in the book. So when they act like Alexis does not have any motivation besides Malik, I'm like, what are you talking about? Her biggest motivation in the story, and the reason for her actions, and the reason why she ends up betraying him and joining the people who are doing Bane magic, is because, as she keeps saying, none of y'all are listening. None of y'all are paying attention. These girls may not have magic, but they're still important. Their lives matter. We're seeing what's going on in the fucking news this week. So, and we're seeing all these black women are important, they matter, this and that, all up and down your timeline. But people have an issue with a character who is actively fighting for them. And I do talk about activism in YA and specifically children's book. I talk about it a lot. In college, it makes more sense for you to start taking those leaps towards activism, just because you're learning new things. You're in these big groups that are going out actively doing things. Like, when I was in college and I was in the BSU, that was the first round of Black Lives Matter, because a lot of people think it started in 2020. It did not. It started before then. They're like, we were seeing that was happening all around the country, and they wanted to speak out about it. So they formed a group just to do a protest step on campus in front of everybody.
Yeah, I think for me, it was like, I feel like there were only two ways for Alexis to be. Either she was going to be a hard black girl, or she was going to be a soft black girl. Somebody was going to be mad she was hard. Somebody was going to be mad she was soft. He wasn't going to please all of y'all. So that's the first thing. If she had been a black girl that just didn't care and just went with the flow and da 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 da, oh, she's a pick me and da 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 da, she's an activist and she's fighting and da da da, oh, now you're making her have to take on the world and she has to do all this.
And she's fighting for black girls. She's not fighting for black men, because what we typically see as a critique of black women in the activist space is, oh, you're being a mule for black men, and they wouldn't support you the same way. She's not being a mule for black men. She's talking about the girls, and that gets confronted in the book. And at one point in the book, Malik does stand up for her, and they're at that party. He tries to check Empress Bonclair, and she checks him right back and corrects him and lets him know there are people who are in a part of this group who are doing things within the black community. They're not advertising that they have magic, but we have doctors here who have done so much for the black community. And she goes down listing all these different people who have worked in the black community. She's like, this is for the betterment of all the community. So just because you two smartasses think you know it all doesn't mean that there aren't people actively doing things within the black community in this order.
That, so this is what I like about the book, right? I like about the book because it's having conversations that we as black people have been having, right? Like, people were upset about the Killmonger references, but I was like, he's getting y'all ready for the bigger story. That's why he's like, in case y'all don't get it, I need y'all to get ready. We're having that conversation, right? Because the black people who watch Black Panther, right? Like, there were those of us who were like, yeah, Killmonger shouldn't have killed the women, blah, blah, blah. But also, Killmonger wasn't wrong in, why did y'all leave us out here? Right? Like, there is a whole conversation about Black Americans and what we were going through when there were resources that we weren't able to tap into, right? And so there's a whole nother conversation going on. So all of y'all blowing up about book one like it's not a series with a whole overarching story.
Because another thing I saw a lot of people saying online is they're like, this is literally Weez from the ghetto from American Fiction. I'm like, did you guys watch American Fiction? Because I actually did watch it recently. Like when I was taking my flight on the way down, I'm like, you know what, let me watch American Fiction. And I finally did. And I think people are only referencing the trailer, because in the actual movie, and granted, a lot of the movie is specifically about him, and they don't always get into the publishing stuff. I think a lot of people don't understand that going into the movie either. There were definitely a lot of things that were touched upon but needed to be expanded upon. Right. But the movie was more focused on his issues with his family versus what was going on in the publishing world. But they had a conversation where he tried to come at her because they're judging this literary competition, and his fake book that he just threw a bunch of stereotypes in and decided to publish because he was angry about her book, she had critiques for it. And he's like, well, I don't know why you have critiques, because you wrote that book and you're not even from the hood, you're from the suburbs. And she's like, but I went into the community and I talked to real women, and this is their real story. That was her argument towards him. She's like, because he has this idea of the type of Blackness that he believes should be shown. And like, yeah, maybe it's not her job to tell that story. That should be somebody else, like, who's actually experienced that, should be telling that story. But like, she had a good point that it's still real people's stories that she was trying to depict.
And also, I just feel like y'all didn't watch the movie or read the book, because no, like, that book was horribly written. Like, it was a caricature book. Like, when she reads sentences from that book, it does not read like how we talk. It reads ridiculous. That's not how this book reads. When you turn on that audiobook, he sounds like a regular Black boy. Now, how you hear it in your head, I can't help you. But when you press play on that audiobook, he don't sound like he's parodying somebody. He sounds like he's telling you about his life. That's a different thing.
Yeah, so there were multiple conversations being had about Black publishing within that movie, which are conversations we're having all the time, but I don't think it was fully clicking for people, because I don't think a lot of people actually watched it. I think they just saw the trailer.
Right. Yeah, because there's so much going on in that book. Like, there's so much going on. And the thing is for me, you are not going to convince me that publishing ate this book up. You're not, because we don't have anything else remotely close to this out. No, you know who's eating it up? The people who've been asking and praying and begging for a book like this.
Yeah, because there's a lot of everybody hates this book, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not true. It's sitting like in the 4s on Goodreads. I'm seeing a lot of actual teens talking about how they felt seen by this book. I'm seeing people who have not read Black fantasy. They're picking up this book and they're like, I really enjoyed it and I want to go read some more.
For me, I just want us to give Black boys the same grace we give Black girls. Truly. Like, if we can read White Smoke and not have any problem with her fucking growing weed in abandoned houses and whatnot, and that makes perfect sense.
That was the least offensive thing.
That's okay, and that's the least. That's not even offensive at all. We can read "You Should See Me in a Crown" and nobody bat an eyelash that the best friend has us hate.
Nobody critiqued how
the only other Black person in the entire book has us thinking he is a villain for the entire book, only for it to be a lie. Like, come on. Like, if we are honestly not critiquing these other books in that way, if we're honestly not doing that, I just need people to really look in the mirror and reflect, what makes you feel so comfortable doing this to this Black boy and this Black man? Like, why? Why don't you want to see him win? Why aren't you like, okay, this might not have been my cup of tea, but I can see me giving another book a chance, because I can see what he's trying to do here. And I want to do, like, I'll never read something else he's ever written. I'll never, like, what are y'all? We literally let TDJ get away with profiting off of a whole slew of Black girls who have been mistreated and manipulated by R. Kelly without thinking anything. But y'all are mad because he wrote about a girl's booty going berserk on him. Like, and I'm saying these things because these are literally the only things people pointed out. Like, they said homophobia, they said transphobia, they said misogyny.
Let me
but
there. They said transphobia, but there's no trans character in the book for there to be a phobia.
Detail. They just said these words.
Like, I saw nobody critique in Slay how early on she, first of all, when we're introduced to the main character, she describes her skin tone using the paper bag test as a measurement to for us to know what her skin tone is. It says something like she's darker than the paper bag test. Then immediately it gets into her Black boyfriend and how people think he's a hotep and this and that, and he's racist against white people. And I saw little critiques of that still to this day when I see people talk about, they're like, I loved it, 5 stars. People talk about the pop culture in this book, but people did not have a problem with the pop culture in that book, even though it is thrown at you. There's so many Wakanda references in there. There's so many little things about pop culture mentioned over and over and over again, like almost like a checklist. Nobody had any critiques for that.
Wasn't it Britt who said that in one of the like Dear Justice or Dear Malcolm books, he literally says he's like afraid of Black girls and nobody said nothing about it? Like, it's like a
see, an author, Zeta Elliott, did say something about that in Dear Martin, and she got torn apart by her fellow YA authors. Like, they tried to ruin her career, but since she already had a long-standing career, they couldn't do that. And she's actually written middle grade, like, for Black boys during a time when there was none. But Ryan Douglas had pointed out all the issues within Black YA and the way in which Black boys are treated as props. He talked about that heavily during his time on Twitter, and a lot of Black women authors in the community turned against him. To this day, I hear people say, yeah, I was told to stay away from Ryan.
I have said, I've said with my full chest out, I saw how y'all did Ryan, and I'll be damned if I sit here and be quiet and watch y'all do it to Ladarian. I'll be damned. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is that y'all have against these Black men, and the only thing they got in common is they both Black and they both queer. So I don't know what it is that y'all have against them. But y'all just cannot let these men write their fucking stories and go on about their business. Like, this story, like, I can totally get if the writing style is not your jam. I can totally get if, you know, maybe it was just too Black for you. You wanted more racial diversity because that's what you like to, whatever the case may be. But like, to blatantly lie about the story, to start whole
out of context,
to write a fucking 15-page, 4,000-word dissertation. Like, bro, did your mama not hug you enough? Is your book not challenging you enough in the edits that you're currently working on? I literally cannot stand that woman as a writer. You will never get me to read another one of her books ever in life. I don't care if she starts in a whole nother age category. And I'm still not writing a 5,000 word anything about her. Why would I give somebody that much time if I honestly think what they're doing is that detrimental? You sound like a hater, bro.
But the thing is, a lot of people were like, well, I don't like how the author acts on social media. What does it have to do with your review of the book?
What does that have to do with the book?
Like, if your thing is you're critiquing the book, why are you critiquing what he said that was personal to him in the author's letter? Because that, again, that has nothing to do with the story. How you feel like he didn't earn his spot in the YA publishing world because he didn't go through the 10-year trenches. What does that have to do with the story? Like, there were a lot of people who are currently trying to write their books and they're in the trenches, and they should be happy that this book could possibly open doors for them because this broke out of the book community. That's the thing. He specifically marketed to people outside of the regular book community. Right. It's all over the place outside of the book community. Not even Legendborn did that. I cannot name a recent YA book that's done that other than Children of Blood and Bone.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to me how people are going line by line talking about, well, I critique books and I don't go, I'm not here to just please people for writing a Black story. Like I'm here to be critical too, but I'm like, you don't go line by line with the books by women.
Like,
I'm like, there are a lot of books by women that came out recently that people were just like, yeah, this isn't for me. I like amazing writer. They're so good at writing, but I couldn't get into the story whatsoever. And then they just say nothing about it. But I'm like, if they were such an amazing writer, how come you didn't connect with the story?
I didn't hear all this smoke for Ace of Spades. I didn't hear, like, there's just so many stories that like fell horribly flat that has so many other like glaring things, right? Like
if we're talking about stereotypes, Ace of Spades had a ton of them. First of all, the author is not from the US, so that she said it in the US was questionable to me, because you don't know the Black experience in the US other than what you've seen on TV. She put so many stereotypes on that boy. Not only was he closeted, he had his mom had children with multiple men. His daddy was in jail. He was getting bullied by the neighborhood gangs and the white people at school. They were so broke. I think it said that he was so broke he could not afford shoelaces.
All I remember is people loving Ace of Spades. So, like, again, I just feel like I just want Black boys to get some grace, for the main reason that they don't have a lot to look for. Can we at least let them get some books before we start trying to like expect them to be A1 100%? Because, like, truly, what do y'all expect from a kid that grew up with no parents?
And like I said, if you didn't like Blood at the Root, you can still try Never Eat.
Never Eat. And let's hear what you think about that. Like,
But don't go into Never Eat immediately expecting to critique the depiction of Black girls in that story. Not saying there's anything wrong with the depiction of Black girls in the story. I'm saying don't go into it with that mindset, because you don't go into that mindset when you pick up books by Black women immediately going, I'm going to see how they write Black boys and if they did it correctly. Because if you did, you would notice how a lot of the times Black boys are written the same and very written down. Like, there are a lot of Black women authors who believe, like, in order to combat the things they're seeing in real life, where we kind of project on Black boys and men to be overly masculine, that they're going to write them as more subservient in these books. Like, they're quieter, they're inoffensive, they won't scare the white editors who are reading these books. But then they end up just kind of be flat. Like, because how many athletes have you encountered in real life who they're quiet and they don't talk to the girls at all at school? But I see it all the time in YA.
And then we've been matching them up with the bookish, quiet bookworm who's like super
also
sex and all these other things.
That is the part that doesn't click for me. She's the quiet bookworm, but at the same time, she has the most sexual experience. I'm not saying you can't be bookish and have sex. I'm just saying, like, there's a specific type of image they're trying to push. Like, well, she's got her own, and even though she's really quiet and barely knows how to talk to people, she has all this experience more than him. He's the quiet virgin type.
Yeah, like the scene where people are like, she asked him when he's like, "Are y'all fucking or not?" That's very misogynistic. And I was like,
but she checked him immediately after, like,
yeah. Here's my thing. We don't even got to get to that. Y'all are not gonna sit here and act like there wasn't a whole fight before that. Like, what are we talking about? We're in a room with 5 people. I've known one of these 5 people since I was 8 years old. So I have an actual relationship with you. Everybody else in the room is saying, yo, boy, he's wrong. You looking at me like, well, neither one of y'all should have fought. I'm going to ask you, do you and him got something going on too? Because that's the only reason I can think of why you would be the only one not agreeing that this person is wrong. What are we talking about here? Like, I just need people to be realistic about the entire scene.
And she does say in the scene, like, well, you don't understand me like he does and stuff.
Right. He didn't say that the first day he saw her, hey, you fucking this dude? No. It wasn't an unprovoked question. It wasn't nothing like that. Then, not only did she check him, he checked himself. He literally says, you right. We not together. This don't got nothing. I don't have a reason to feel. I just need y'all clear. Ain't nobody over there for you, baby. It's literally nobody.
And like that was what I consider a very realistic fight. Just because you never saw it in person doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Like I ride the Amtrak with college students sometimes when I go on my trips to Philly. So I've heard some crazy arguments being yelled at over the phone between people with like way more offensive language that would have people clutching their pearls ready to like cancel if we even wrote in a book.
I've seen it in Twitch streams. Somebody a little too friendly in the chat and they boyfriend, girlfriend walk in the room. Hey, who's this per? Why they say all that? Like, bro, like, and those are adults.
Like, it depends on your environment, too.
Like, I just feel like, for me, we need to be fair. We say we want realistic portrayals. This is what real kids act like. And if anything, they way messier than this, if we're being honest.
And
I have heard kids say way worse things than in here. In this book, nobody was slut shamed. Nobody was talked about for any of the things that they did. Nobody was called out for any of the people they dated in the past. Nobody was really talked about for even being poor. Like, it wasn't even brought up like that he was being poor. There were no roasting sessions.
Nobody was called a thought.
Being real honest, there were a lot of things that could have been way worse in this book that were not. They handle these situations a lot better than actual kids today would. Are we being real? Like, we have seen the viral y'all remember that? The sausage. That is not clean. That is literally about a penis. That is from a high school. Them niggas was in high school talking about sausage. Are we, like, come on, y'all.
Because, like, there are plenty of, like, Black people vlogging their college experience, too. You should hear some of the things, like, even the girls talk about.
When I was a freshman in college and my sisters and cousins were going into their freshman year of high school, these little girls was listening to Look Back at It Like by Trina. Okay, right. Everybody knew. I was clutching my pearls and look back at it like Trina. That ain't nothing compared to what's out now. That ain't nothing compared to what's out now.
Yeah, so like the expectations for this book to completely dismantle patriarchy are kind of crazy because first, like, we'd have to really start with hip hop, and this is not a book about hip hop culture.
Like, no, like, it's a book about teenagers in college with magic. Like, I want the critiques to be about valid things. Like, all right, if we're talking misogynoir, what exactly was misogynoir to you?
I keep asking for examples, and they keep only giving me the twerking as examples or thoughts that were inside of his head versus verbal things that he said. And I'm like,
Yeah, I'm not beating a child without parents over the head for a thought.
And they weren't
they like, pouring water down their back and twerking out it. Like literally, there's a whole water challenge. Literally. Like, are we being for real now? Like truly. Like that's a perfect example. That is a perfect example of a
song
that not only adults but teenage girls were doing. But are those girls being misogynoir to themselves? Was that what that was? Or were they expressing themselves? Were they just girls being girls? Because then, if we say that they're wrong for doing that, are we calling them fast? And is that on us? Are we then adultifying them? Because again, all I saw was kids dancing at a freaking party. That's all that scene in the story was. Kids dancing at a party.
And it wasn't even that descriptive. Like, he wasn't saying, and her cheeks was going up and down. Like I said, there was no reference to anybody's titties doing anything. When like in real life, you be hearing the girls, like, I will say it if I see a girl with like big titties, like,
big titties is titty girl.
Yes, exactly.
I see the girls is out today. Like, are we? Come on, y'all. I will say things that I love. I loved. I love Malik and Tay. As someone who has lived in foster care, as someone who knows how strong those bonds and relationships can be, like the love that he showed for that boy throughout that book, 10 out of 10. Like that scene, he crying, I'm crying too. We crying together. Like, come on, you the big brother. You got this. You got this. Like, I loved it. Like, it had me in my feelings in the best way because I'm an older sibling. I know what that feels like. I know that, like, I do gotta go be the older sibling. I do gotta go to college. I do gotta step away, and I gotta trust that you're gonna be okay. But I need a life too. But I also want you to be good. Like, just the realness behind that was just so beautifully depicted for me. I loved it. I loved it. It was one of my favorite parts. As much as Malik is a good character, I think, he has flaws, but he's a good character.
He does learn. Like I said, he later in the book, there is a scene where he's listening to D'Lo talk, which again, D'Lo, he literally introduces his name as D'Angelo. I don't understand why this suddenly became a big issue in like the past month, because again, I was an ARC reader. I saw the early reviews. People did not have a problem with his name whatsoever. And it's really inconsequential to the story. This is not and who is on the down low, which when's the last time you heard somebody who wasn't like over 50 say down low? But also he listens to him tell his story at a meeting about his bisexual experience, and he's like, I ain't never thought about anything like this before. Guess I'm privileged in that way as a straight dude. But I didn't see anybody screenshotting that.
Right. I saw a lot of people ignore the ways in which he adjusted his thinking or adjusted his thought or said something or like tried to make a moment to where like, okay, that wasn't what I expected. Let me think differently. Like even when he found out that Danye was bisexual and Savon was like, he was like, I wasn't. I didn't know. I didn't know. It's not something you just know automatically. And I appreciate it.
And it was honest that he could have potentially said something that was phobic, but people took that and ran with it as he's this phobic. No, like we're saying like he was about to say something really ignorant.
Right. And that's a completely different thing. I think that for me, like I said, my two favorite characters were D-Lo and Savon. I loved their characters completely, like the way that they were and how they moved. I think it's funny because I know I remember Deja saying that she felt like they kind of like blurred together. All the characters were very distinct for me. I didn't get anybody mixed up with anybody else. I think the only person's name I can't readily remember is the female professor's name from the battlefield when they were on the football field. I can't remember her name, but I remember her and what she did. And like
I like the classroom scenes. I actually thought they were very well done, and that is something I'm not really used to seeing in these types of stories. Like, okay, so I watched The Order on Netflix, and one thing that show does really well is it's at a college and they actually go to class, and things that are said in the class, like whether it's philosophy class or it's like English class or something, kind of correlate with what's going on in the episode. So I like that the students were going to class and they're having all these different, like very vivid experiences because they're going back in time and stuff like that. And they're learning different things about the magic along the way.
I like that too. I thought that it was a great way to use the classroom scene. It reminded me of,
and it also taught a little bit of history.
Right. It reminded me of this show that I used to watch when I was younger called Strange Days at Blake Cozy High.
Yes, I love that show.
But it was like similar, like stuff that they did in class would like correlate to what was happening in the episode. And so I liked that not only did stuff that they did in class correlated to what was going on, but even the conversations they would have at lunch or they would be having in the dorm room, like all of it would come back to it. And I just like the way he set the tone for the different conversations that I could see happening over the course of it. Like, again, the nigga that wanted to write 5,000 word page essay, like, you know, he was trying to get his PhD or whatever the fuck. That nigga, he said something about the demonization of the Bakors and the thing. I was like, see, here's the part that pisses me off. Is because if you read the book, then you clearly read in the story how there are two ways of viewing the Bakors and what they did and how they moved. If you cannot plainly see that he is going to explore both of those ways in the story, in the overall arching story, then maybe you don't need to be writing books. If you don't know how to, like, sir, you can't piece that together. Like, you're not piecing that together. Like, I saw it from the very first moment we get the preview of the Haitian Revolution. Like, what are you talking about? Like, they're not just evil. We know that. We know that it is a perception over reality. It is a deeper conversation. It's not black and white. That's the whole point. Why are you over here lying about something that if you read the book, you would clearly see?
And it's interesting too, like just the conversation they were having, because like I remember when I was in school, like at my particular school, there were only like a couple of like Black studies related classes, and those were run by an older Black woman who ended up retiring while I was there, and a white Southern woman who was actually the white Southern lady ended up having to become the advisor for the BSU because, you know, every club needed a teacher who was an advisor for them. Right. And she like even sat in our meetings sometimes and had to like correct some people because she's like, I'm from the South, so like this and this, it like you don't know that experience.
Right. Like there are things that are Southern, period. There are things that are just are and just do. And I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like there are things that can be critiqued about the book, right? Like for me, I was more concerned that we're having sex in the book. And I can't remember. I feel like I remember in the section, I don't remember anything about safe sex.
No, I don't remember any protection.
I don't remember protection. I don't like if we're gonna talk about things that should be talked about in a book where we have queer representation out the ass. Why are we not talking about protection? Because we have sex out the ass in the book. We know multiple people are sexually active. Why is there not a conversation? Like hey, get away from that door. Like there are things that you can critique that are truly things that okay, there needs to be conversations about because we don't have enough conversations about teens having sex and using protection in books. If you're gonna make them have sex, let's make them be safe about it. If you're gonna make them have sex, let's make them have conversations about getting tested. Like if we're going to make them do these adult things, there's things that like
I saw some critique about the depiction of HBCU, but like nobody was expanding on it at all. Like, there was a thread going around like this is a caricature of HBCUs, but then every time people asked that girl what she meant by it, she didn't explain.
She didn't say anything because she couldn't
say it was the caricature.
Because you're lying.
But in that,
you're just saying stuff.
But then in that dissertation, like it's like this isn't how HBCUs are. They were like going in the quad, and there were a lot of name brand restaurants, and I'm like that's every college, and that I know that's at HBCUs because I visited a few HBCUs, and even when I was in college, I remember having a coworker at my winter job, like back home, who went to Cheney, which is one of the first HBCUs in the country and one of the only ones here in Pennsylvania. And she was like, "Oh yeah, we have Chick-fil-A, we have this, we have that," and that's stuff my school didn't even have. It's a PWI,
right?
Like name brand restaurants are going to be on campus. Like they have specific franchises that mainly franchise on campuses.
I just want to know why were you so upset? Like what upset you?
There were other mentions of other HBCUs. He didn't do any real life ones, which I can see why, because you know how people get about their school.
But
right. They mentioned sister ones, like they mentioned University
and
is the coast of Africa. They like it was mentioned they also have like a feeder smaller prep school right in Alabama, which shocked him because he knew nothing about it, and that was like right next door where he lived. And I like found it interesting that nobody was really talking about that part.
Right. No, like I said, we said since we've been preparing for this thing, like there's been a lot of buzzwords and a lot of accusations about the book, but there haven't been like a lot of things to back it up, right? And like I said, like I am all for critiques like that make sense, right? And things that work their ways out of like, hey, this bothered me about this. I see this as an issue. But I'm also like, are we giving things the same smoke? If you read Grown, Legendborn, Monday's Not Coming, White Smoke, all of these, and you didn't have issues with none of this other stuff, like in the same similar things happening in those books, and those weren't even those people's first book. Well, Legendborn was her first book, but and then for Tiffany D. Jackson, though that wasn't her first book, like these weren't debuts, these weren't them learning the business. Come on.
And one of the major critiques too that told me that people didn't make it past chapter 2 was that they were like, well, he said this was going to be trauma-free in the mom days. First of all, I remember when he said it was going to be trauma-free. I remember because you were really, really heated at the backlash for that. And he retracted and apologized about making that comment and clarified what I meant was it wasn't like white racial trauma in the book. And so I don't know why people are still holding on to that to begin with, because it's not like he led with that marketing going forward.
No, he
but also the mom doesn't actually die. By chapter 5-ish, they end up like he ends up finding out like actually no, she's probably still alive.
Right.
And then that becomes his focus.
His first thought is always that she's been alive. Like his thought
There
is
was no
always
body
that she's
recovered.
alive and everyone else thinks she's dead. Like that's always what his thought has been. So even then, it's just like that one girl who was like, he was in foster, the mom dies and he was in foster care, which means that he was in a single parent home, but okay, no trauma. Wait one fucking minute.
That
Wait
felt like
one
a really rude swipe against people from a single parent home.
wait
You don't know
one
whose parent
second.
died, and that's
You
why
don't
they
know whose parent died. You don't know nothing. You don't shut up.
like a lot of people were raised by grandmas. He actually has to have like that conversation with his grandma, like, why didn't you come and get me?
Like I remember having to message Deidre because I was like, I'm having a hard time dealing with Malik right now. And I'm having a hard time dealing with Malik because when I got put in foster care, right? Like it never occurred to me that anybody in my family outside of my parents had any responsibility to me. So I would have never been mad at my grandmother, mad at my like, because there were people in my family who could have got me out of those shelters and I would not have been in there. And they definitely left me in there. But it never occurred to me, even as a child, to be mad at those people because they weren't my parent. And so I'm reading the story and I'm like, how are you so disrespectful to this woman? It is not, it wasn't her job to take care of you. And I'm having to remind
And then
myself.
we find out that like, well, it was kind of hinted at before, like she says, I could not sense you at all.
Right,
But then later we find out that his mom actually cast a spell to make sure that she could not
she
sense
couldn't find it and she couldn't sense it. Right. Like there's more
like, for
to
so
the
many
thing,
years.
right? But even in the moment, I'm like, why are you don't know why she couldn't find you? Why are you talking to her like this? What are you? Y'all don't talk about that. Y'all don't bring that up as a conversation. Like there are points that you could be like, these were things that made me feel away in the book. Y'all don't point to them. Y'all don't have them, right? I loved that that was where he started with Mama Aya, but that's not where he ended. So when people are like, there's no character growth, I can't see no, what the fuck are you talking about? He went from not being able to call her his grandmother, not being able to say I love you, to being able to do all of those things by the end. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, and like there is a point in the book early on where he literally talks about how, you know, when he's back in his old neighborhood, how like he didn't even think about having like cousins or aunties or grandma or this or that, because that's not what he knew. It was only him and his mom, and like the women in the neighborhood were like his aunties and uncles, but nobody wanted to take him in because they felt like they thought he killed his mom or like was involved in her death.
Right. And to me, all right, why didn't y'all talk about that? Why didn't y'all talk about the fact, the demonization of that black boy by all those black people in his fucking neighborhood? How about that? How about the fact that all these people are supposed to be his aunts and uncles in the neighborhood and love him and da da da, but for some reason y'all just knew this 7-year-old had to kill his mom. That's what it had to be. That's
Even
what it had to be.
Even when we get to the neighborhood, he's reminiscing about things like he saw in the neighborhood, like the icy lady. And somebody was like, well, why is that in here? I'm like, have you been in the hood? Because like, oh, like we used to go to somebody's house into the middle of the block and we pay like $0.25 and they made ices at their house when we buy that. Now there's a lady, like, and I know the lady personally because like I used to work with her granddaughter. She has a push cart that she pushes all around the city and she'd be her little ices when it's hot out.
And somebody was like, it just felt forced, like the candy lady. We get it. You're black. Do you know how many people?
Yeah, we
don't
used to go to the corner
lady?
store and get candy. Like we had a corner store we used to go to all the time. We'd be like, okay, the further corner store has the good candy. We're gonna go there.
Right. Everybody don't have a candy lady. Like it's not the same. Like everybody don't have one. Yeah. So for me, it just made me realize just how differently.
Yeah, like I understood why he felt that type of way with his grandma.
It just made me realize how different I was raised. Because again, like I said, I knew I had aunts and uncles who knew where the fuck we were and could have gotten us out of those children's shelters and didn't even have to come take care of us. They could have put us in in our own home and left us there. We would have taken care of ourselves, but they left us in the shelter. And I was an adult before I was ever was mad at them for not doing that. So in my head, I was just like, this is just so disrespectful. But I'm also like, I had my grandma for 15 years before I got into foster care. You had your mom for 7. I'm gonna give you that grace. I'm gonna give you that grace. Because again, I'm taking the time to fucking think. I'm taking the time to think that yes, I'm an adult who doesn't like something this 17-year-old boy did in this story because I'm 30 fucking 3 and I have the experience to know that this was disrespectful and there's more to life and there's a lot more other things that could have happened that prevented this. He's 17 and he hasn't computed that.
Yeah, and I like the depiction of like when like in his old neighborhood when like he goes and he has all the memories like flooding his mind about different things he remembers there, because like if I were to describe my block to somebody, like, oh yeah, there's like, you'll usually see people out fixing their cars, like sometimes you'll see people braiding hair on the step. Like I saw people talking about that. I'm like, that's very common in the hood, actually, to see people sitting on the step when it's warm braiding hair.
Literally, getting your hair. My grandma used to do that all the time.
Like we got people sitting on the step braiding hair out here. We got people like I live around a lot of Puerto Ricans and Dominicans. They be frying food sometimes to sell in front of their house. Like people get real creative, and like when it's summer, people like to be outside doing all these things. So you'll hear like reggaeton music blasting. A lot of the old people, not on my block, but on my aunt's block, like which is a couple blocks over, they just sit outside in their chairs all day chilling. One lady even has like a whole basically flea market set up with a tent where she'd be selling clothes and stuff.
Oh wow.
So like none of that felt unrealistic to me or over the top or trying to be too black. I'm like, he's just describing the neighborhood.
Right. Yeah, I just like I said, like I'm all here for good critiques. I just haven't seen good critiques. Like that's been my thing. Like I know that I'm gonna continue reading the series because I'm interested to see how deep he goes into these conversations, because y'all know how I feel. Like everything that we put out in public consumption is automatic mixed company. So there's things that I wanted to say that I'm not saying because it's automatic mixed company. So I'm curious of how deep he can get into some of the conversations we want to have, knowing that other people are gonna read these books, especially after this, right? Like,
and then like especially because like
I wonder what it feels like. I wonder what it feels like to have written this book, watch a white woman make a video and call twerking misogynistic, and just see a whole slew of black people jump on that train with her without digging into it for themselves. I can't imagine what that could have felt like truly.
And not just like people's videos. I saw people tagging him in like their critiques on Twitter, like not even just critiques, because it wasn't really critiques, like it was just hating ass stuff. Let's be honest.
Hate, right? Because again, critiques, you're coming with examples, you're coming with statements and facts, and this is
like
why
some people were definitely out of pocket. I don't believe in tagging the author in anything. Like for none of the books that I've had a lot to say about have I ever tagged an author. Like that's the type of stuff that will get you popped in real life.
Like that's the part that I don't think people realize. Like the people are still human, are still very much human, and y'all try to attack people's character.
And like it's okay to critique stuff. I started going to book events like in the past year, so I see authors like I may not have loved their book, but we can still have a conversation.
Right. Like I have definitely, y'all know me, I'm usually a 3 strikes and you out author, like a reader. Like I'm definitely going to give you a chance. Now, if you're a series, I might read 2 books in the series and then I'll just wait till you write something else and then I'll check that third thing out in something completely different, because I don't want to waste my third thing on your series and I'm not already liking it. You know what I mean? Like I'm totally okay with that, because I understand that everything isn't for me, first and foremost, right? But I think that there are a lot of people who are reading this book as adults and not getting that. It's not for you. Like, you're not supposed to be comfortable in a 17-year-old boy's head as a 30-year-old woman. Full stop. I'm not comfortable in the 16-year-old girls' heads I'm reading in these YA books because I'm still a 33-year-old woman. Like, there's going to be parts in these stories that make you uncomfortable because they're not just your story, but that's not supposed to keep you from being able to read it. Isn't that what we tell white people all the time? Isn't that what we say? Like, it hasn't stopped us from reading Babysitter's Club or the freaking vampire books or werewolf books or whatever, just because we can't completely relate to what they're going through. So now, because we're not 17-year-old black boys from Helena, Alabama, all of a sudden, blood at the root's not good because we can't relate to this boy. Like,
and I'm not even saying that you have to say the book is good. I really don't care if you like it or not. I'm just saying that when your critiques are rooted in anti-blackness and anti-southernness, that's an issue that you need to dissect.
And that's how they always come off, because
that's something as if you are over the age of 21, you should know better. Like I said, when I went through my phase where I was just like, you know what, I'm done with these hood books, and then I had to check myself. And I've mentioned this publicly before.
There was a time where I was like, I don't read hood books because whenever I would talk to black people about books, the ones that were in my area, because I grew up in the hood, that's all that they would read because that was all that they could relate to. And I'd be like, but there's so much more.
Yes, that was my
I felt a way about it. But then I grew the fuck up.
Yeah, I grew up, I met more hood people and I let that shit go.
Because I was literally a child when I thought like that. Like,
Yeah. And I still see people read a lot of like the hood books. Like when I used to see a lot of like, because I live around a lot of Latinx people, so I would see them reading these hood black books. That's what they can relate to when they're going for English speaking content. The first thing they go to is those types of black stories.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly, I feel like this was a really good start to a series. I think he did a good job setting up an overarching story. Like, I think he left enough breadcrumbs to keep you wanting to know what's gonna happen next. I think he left enough groundwork for you to see already growth and change in the character and how he can continue to grow and develop. And I'm intrigued to see where he goes with it. And I'm
like, the way it ended with the mom, like, now we know she's definitely alive and she's around. What are we going to do about that? We also have to plot with his dad. Is it his name, or like, is it this who we think it is or not?
Right. We got to deal with Alexis. She's not in the school, but she's still magical and she's still in the world. And her not being in the school isn't going to make her not want to start helping black people. So, like, where is that going to go? And what's going on with that? And I think that
and it's interesting because I'm rewatching The Order, which it's been off Netflix for a while. So sorry if this is a spoiler for you guys, but like the female lead in there, also she disagrees with what The Order is saying in season 2 and goes her own path with like the bad people.
Interesting.
And she's white.
Interesting. I like it just in general because, I mean, for me, always, I've always been a fan of Magneto over a fan of Professor X, a fan of Malcolm over Martin. Like, I've always been a fan of standing up for ourselves and not, making sure that, we're taken care of over trying to, blend with humans and whatnot. So I'm already reading the book and like, y'all are kids. So yeah, y'all are like, yeah, let's use our magic to do this and da 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 da. And for right now, it sounds good that we're black magical people. What you think white people gonna do when they find out that they're a magical black people? Do you think that they gonna wait to find out which black people are magical or not? Like, you're not thinking about those consequences just yet. but the people before you might have already been considering that and already been working on that because they're adults who have lived longer. And so those are conversations that I've already, in my head, like, ooh, Ladarian, there's so much. You done laid a good foundation, brother. I'm trying to see where you going with it. I'm trying to see where you going
There's
with it.
a lot to go to talk about in book 2 and 3. And like he set up a lot of different potential storylines with different characters, which I appreciated.
Yeah.
Like I can understand if people said it was a little confusing for them and the plots was like a lot for them because there was a lot of information in the book. But I was very interested. Like I said, Act 1 was just very slow for me. But once we got into Act 2, I'm like, okay, now we're at the school, stuff is happening.
I totally agree. Act 1 is a very slow burn of an open. Act 1
and I
is
don't like slow burn opens. That's the reason why I could not get into Briar, unfortunately. Like I felt it was too slow from the jump. I'm just like, you know what? This is just not for me, and that's why I gave it to you.
Oh, you talking about Briarwood? Yeah, because it definitely that is definitely a slower, mellow story. It's not a lot of action and everything like that. Like there is a very good storyline in it, but it's just we're going through life and day by day and da 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 da. It's a life happens story. Like, you know what I mean? Like a slice of life. This is what happened in this school year kind of thing. And I appreciated that, right? Like that's what Jesus Never Went to College is similar to, right? Like there's not a lot happening outside of she's going to college and this is her freshman year and she's experiencing what college is. It's not a mystery, it's not necessarily a thriller. I mean, it could be when I'm finished with, but that wasn't the original idea for it. So it is just going through life as a college girl. And I feel like that's how we start off with Blood at the Root. And I don't necessarily think that was a bad option. I think it was a different option. I I do think I would have went a different route. I think I would have chosen a different way.
I would have probably just condensed some of those chapters in the middle of Act 1, like because we definitely needed the part where he and Tay escape. But I would have probably like cut.
Honestly, I probably would have condensed them first too, because you really didn't need to do the run in with the guys and steal the car. You could have just stole a different car and you could have just had the gas station scene and that could have been that.
Yeah.
But I think you wanted to just make it a little bit more intense and get the magic kind of showing in the beginning, which is cool. I get that. But again, I think it goes back to the conversation we've had in me and Brett have had in the writerly conversations about Save the Cat. Like it's just a little formulaic in how they feel like YA fantasy stories should be told and whatnot. And that's just something you got to deal with when, dealing with craft books. I don't think book 2 will be that way. I feel like, it'll be different in that aspect.
We already have the setup.
Right. And I do think if he does another series, I don't think he'll do that in that way again. Like I feel like you're learning. This is your first time. You'll get better. Right? Like I think that he is showing that he has a good foundation and a lot of room for improvement. And like the girl said in American fiction, like potential is what people say when they think that what you have right now isn't good enough. And what he has right now is great. If we get more of this for the rest of the series, I'm still satisfied. But this being where he started, I am only more excited for where he goes because I only feel like he can go up from here. Like I only feel like he's gonna get better with time.
I agree.
All right. Any final thoughts from anybody in here? Yeah, I'm with you, KJ, on like tagging authors is definitely going. Hey, Leah, it's so good to see you.
Yeah, let's not do that. Also, be mindful of the stuff you're having a widespread conversation with on book Twitter. Let me just tell you, a lot of agents and authors do like agents, authors, editors are on there paying attention to what you're writing. For some of y'all who got like querying books that you're trying to put out, they're like, "Oh, you're starting drama."
Right.
You're off my list. Yeah. But also there were white people watching and even somebody did a breakdown thread of the drama for the white people to understand what was going on, and they like are taking notes and trying to jump in, and they're like, well, I never read the book, but this and that. So
yeah,
I'm just saying we a lot of people like say they won't disparage books by Black women, like if they didn't like it they just won't talk about it. But like suddenly everybody who usually says that was okay with going ham on this one.
Right. And that's where I was just like, come on, y'all. Like I can see it. This is the third or fourth book that he done, and they all feel like, like, come on.
There's a way to express your criticism without being disrespectful. And if it's coming at people for like, again, because we know Black Southerners get made fun of for the way they talk. Like that's when you're looking into anti-Blackness.
So many threads, so many conversations about how Beyonce doesn't do interviews anymore, how we don't get to hear Beyonce talk about anything because people talked about her accent and people talked about how she talked. We've seen so many conversations about the basketball player from the WNBA who just won and people talking about her accent, or the football player and the basketball player in the drafts and their accents. Like, these are things that we really have to contend with on a daily basis, and then y'all bringing them to the forefront in a way that, like, y'all don't even realize y'all are parroting white supremacist talking points. And then you're like, what will white people think? Like, is that really?
Yeah, because like
that's what's bothering y'all. What white people think reading this book?
Yeah, because I saw somebody say this was like Love and Hip Hop Atlanta.
They're not in it. You know, my favorite thing about Blood at the Root is knowing that when speaking it into existence, when it becomes something we see on our TV, Black people will be eating. Because what happens with Legendborn when it becomes, we have a Black person may be eating, but Blood at the Root got a whole Black cast. We're going to have Black mamas, Black grandmamas, Black granddaddies. A whole Black family will be eating, portraying these people. We have Black non-binary people. We got Black bisexual people. Are y'all like seeing? We got a book with 2 Black bisexual boys. And like y'all are letting that go way over your head. 2 boys who are open to their bisexuality. Like, are we not talking about that? Like,
yeah, and people were having a discussion today, like on Twitter, about Michael B. Jordan and the Fourth Wing adaptation, and like we see how Blood at the Root is doing. That makes people like more likely in Hollywood to want to adapt. And like you said, if it does potentially become a TV show, that's a whole lot of Black people from the actors to the hair and makeup to the writers who would be eating off of the show.
All eating. Because if Ladarian ain't gonna be a part of it, you know he gonna try to get some Black people in the writer's room. So you know what I mean? Like, I just think like there's a bigger picture. And again, there's no part of me that's saying don't critique Black works, because I've told y'all the things in this book that made me feel away.
Yeah, and I critique Black works all the time, but what you don't see me doing is doing like a long Twitter thread, like point by point. I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, and pulling screenshots. I try to be mindful of how I'm critiquing.
Even when I do a hate read, you ain't never seen me tag the author or name the book. I tell y'all, y'all know what book I'm reading. This is the author. I told y'all what I was gonna be doing. Blah blah blah. You're not gonna find it. Why? Because like it's not my intention to bring that person down. Because still, even if I don't like the book, we have always said we deserve to have books that suck. Like, Just because I don't like it don't mean somebody else ain't gonna like it. Just because I thought Cherish Farrah was a horrible book don't mean somebody else didn't read it and feel like, yes, I want to be some white girl's whipping boy. I mean, somebody liked it. I wasn't that person. But somebody loved it. Right? Like somebody read White Smoke and was like, oh, this is creepy. And didn't care about none of the shit that didn't make no sense.
And you had a very good live discussion about the shit that didn't make no sense. It actually got people thinking and actually had people realize that a lot of the books she writes are straight up ripped from the headlines, like copy paste these people's stories. Which there's an interesting.
You know what happened?
You can have about that.
I still can only think of 2 people I know that don't read her books anymore.
Right.
Everybody else still does.
Like, a lot of people still read her and they're like, well, you know, I know she usually does this, but I enjoy her books. And I'm like, yeah, but at the same time, there's something to be said because Law and Order does it too. And I feel like people do come for Law and Order when they do this. But like you're taking people's story and it's a lot of times it's poor Black people. These aren't like celebrities. They're not getting to profit off of their own story. And you're going on to make millions off of their life.
Right.
And there's nothing they can do about it because you change the names.
Right.
Like Azriel has so many issues going on. Like there's a noticeable change just in her appearance from the first time we met her to the last time we've seen her on TV.
Yeah.
And she has not profited off of her own story at all, but there's been at least 2 YA books based off of her story.
Yeah, that's the girl that grown in the other book, right?
Yeah, and Muted.
And Muted, yeah. Right. Like, to me, it is insane to me the amount of like hate and the amount, because I want to say, wasn't it like 100 quotes of that don't read that one boy who did this, like a bunch of people quote retweeted that day of that, and I was like, y'all let this woman write a whole story based off a girl that's alive right now, life, and did not bat an eyelash at the fact that this was her life and living it.
People were going on, like, she went on a publicity tour about that. Was she on TV, maybe, I think, promoting that book?
Y'all are really upset that he named a character D-Lo after his friend, D'Angelo? Like, are we being for real? And
there was D'Angelo's who entered the cast.
And that his name is D'Angelo. You just want to say, I mean, the fact that he named a queer character D-Lo.
But there were D'Angelos commenting on that and like, hold up, now my name is D'Angelo and I go by D-Lo.
Hey, we discussing Blood at the Root. Calf, I think you should read it. I would love to hear your thoughts on it, especially since you were telling me about Black boys and hoodie books that you got. So I definitely think you should read
it. It's perfectly fine if you didn't like the magic system. Like I said, I haven't seen a ton of like the critiques on the magic, specifically on the magic system. I've seen like a few people like, I wasn't really vibing with the magic, blah, blah, blah. But that's not the main focus.
I've heard people say that about the magic system. I am okay with the magic system in book 1 because we're getting the story from Malik's point of view. Malik doesn't know the magic system. So I'm not going to know the magic system. He's only been in school for 2 months. So, right? Like,
I wouldn't see the magic system here is any more convenient either than any other fantasy I've read.
It wasn't any more convenient than what was in Wings of Ebony. Like,
and then we saw how the magic system went in book 2.
Her friends studied in the book and studied spells and knew how to do stuff, and that's literally what Ladarian's character Malik does in the book. So,
and he gave Wings of Ebony a lot of grace for the way in which that it handled the magic, even though that was a big critique a lot of people had about book 1. And then we went in book 2 and like world building was not there.
Right. So I'm hoping that the magic system gets deeper and more fleshed out in the second book. I'm definitely wanting to see more from it. I'm definitely wanting to see more from the campus in the second book. I don't know if I really want to see. I don't know if I really want to see any other points of view. So I don't know if that's something he might play around with, adding another point of view or just keeping it off from Malik. But I would like to see more of him getting to be the kid. Like with how they ended the first book and with that being proclaimed, I know that there's going to be some more fighting. I know that there's going to be some more battling. I want to see some more parties and some more girls twerking. I want to see some more dodgeball games. I want
The
to
dorm
see
wars.
I want to see some more dorm wars. I want a homecoming scene. I want a
Yes.
battle of the bands. Give him a girlfriend that's a majorette. Like I want, I would love, and I'm hoping because they've been talking about wanting to pledge in the fall and everything like that. And I don't know how it works because at least in real life, a lot of fraternities and sororities you can't pledge as a freshman because you have to have certain credits. So I don't know how that's gonna play out in
At the end of
real
the day,
life with that.
magic school.
Right, in the magic school. So I'm curious, especially because they have magical fraternities. Like there is so much that he's given us to work with in book 2, and I'm really, really looking forward to what he does. I like I told Ladarian, like I love Malik Down. I'm invested. I'm invested. And the only thing Malik and Ladarian could do to make me love him more is to figure out a way to bring these prices down because $21 for one book was killing me. But outside of that, I'm good. Outside of that, you got me. I'm in there. They said, I think for me with the magic system, just didn't seem to have rules. How can you just do things, jump through a cell phone in the other part? Maybe it'll be explained in the next one.
Well, they did
So
say that for some. I remember this in the book. For some things, you had to say a spell. For some things, you could just do it, depending on how strong, like, the thing was that you were trying to do.
yeah, and I think for the cell phone, it was like the other thing, like he had to picture something, and he was trying to do it with the cell phone and his brother, and that's why he was like, I don't even think it's gonna work. I'm just gonna try it. And it did happen to work. But I also think for the other thing about his is they put that he has a different type of magic that nobody around him has. So that's another part of it. He's more powerful than everybody around him on top of that. So there's going to be things that he can't explain and that the only person that could explain ain't here to explain no more because she gone. So that's the other part of the story, right? Like there's other things that I feel like that they are explained to an extent, right? Like to me, it makes sense that he can do things that we don't understand because we've been told he has a higher level of magic than a lot of people. It's been said by teachers, everybody. Then we get the flashback that he been having magic a whole 2 years before he even realized he had magic. He just had no memory of it, right? So there's that too. What's that face for? I don't know. I think he laid a good, really, really good foundation. And I'm just excited to see where he goes for it. And I'm rooting for him. And I just encourage anybody, one, to read the book for themselves and make their own decisions and feel.
And I'd like to say, regardless if you like the book or not, you're probably still thinking about it, which we can't say for a lot of recent books.
Right. Very true. Very true. And I take it the audiobook. So when I think of rules, I may be thinking different. I think some of it felt plot convenient because everyone's saying he had a higher level of magic than others.
Yeah, that's every YA book though.
But that's every YA. I was about to say the same thing was said in like Wings of Ebony. Technically the same thing was in the Raybearer duology. Like
and
that was
that's literally every YA fantasy. Like the main character is more powerful. They have a different higher level of magic than everybody else, and some rules don't apply to them. Some are more convenient about it than others, but like that's just like a YA fantasy type of thing. Now, when we get into adult, there's a lot of times like more hard, fast rules.
Yeah. I feel like,
and not even always an adult, because some of the ones I've read recently, like the main character was doing whatever was convenient for the plot.
Yeah, I can't even tell you how the magic system worked in the 100,000 Kingdoms. Because everybody's magic was so different and how it moved and what they could do and it just was. Magic just existed and we just accepted it for what it was. And that's the thing is, I wonder if it's polarizing or if it's just polarizing in the Black book community.
Yeah, because that's another thing too. When you look outside of the community of people who normally read like Black books or like are just like really heavy in the book community, they're saying different stuff.
Yeah. I'm excited for you to finish it too. Right, because Blue, I would love to know what you think. Like truly. Like I would like to be like, okay, like am I tripping? Because I definitely have asked. Like I was like, hey yo, am I tripping? Because like I feel like this ain't really like I've definitely heard boys say stuff and I'll be like, oh my God, that was insane. And this little boy didn't say nothing that I just was like, oh my God, let me just stop.
Yeah. I live like, especially if you lived like on one of those co-ed floors, like I did my first semester.
Yeah, my first year, I was in a boy and girls dorm. Like I was in a co-ed dorm. I was not in an all-girl dorm, and I was like,
the wild stuff I used to hear.
And then living in a co-ed athletic dorm too, bro.
Yeah, because I remember like my first roommate was Black too. So she opened the door one day and she's like, "That was the grossest thing I've ever heard you anyone say."
Man, like there are so many forgettable books. I'm always used to more hard magic system, so it could be I'm not used to it. TJ Young and the Orishas did the different kind of magic character well. That's mainly what I'm comparing it to. Maybe there's something. I haven't read that, so I'll check that out.
I haven't read that one yet.
I haven't read that either. So I think it's just a small minority of people being loud and wrong. Yeah, no, I definitely am thinking that too. The more that I like, and honestly, again, he sold over 20,000 in the first 2 months, and then had a surge over the weekend, and everybody was talking noise, so spiking books. So I mean, y'all talking about it. You're doing what you're supposed to do, and like I told, I said on Twitter, like, sir, I love you, book. I'm gonna be talking about it. I'm gonna be encouraging people to read it. Because again, I have not, and I'm never gonna say that it's perfect. But I'm not looking for perfect Black boys. I'm just looking for Black boys to be Black boys, right? Like he's a Black boy who's learning and growing, and that's all I can ask for. Like I know that I can pass this book to my godson, and I know that he's not gonna be reading no slurs. I know he's not gonna be reading somebody demonizing women. I know he's not gonna be reading somebody putting their hands on women. I know he's gonna be reading somebody like taking.
There's no graphic scene of a Black boy being gunned down.
Right. It's even on like it's like a what's the word? It's like it's all the sex scene is off page, so it's not like super explicit or nothing. The girls be getting explicit sex scenes in the books in sometimes. Like I just feel
I'm still
better
haunted a little bit by that scene where the Black boy got killed in Wings of Ebony. That was very, very, very graphic.
Or when the other one gets snatched up in white smoke and thrown up against the lock, like we have a cop in the scene, and even when the cop gets brought into the scene multiple times, there's no violence against bodies. Like there are just so many different things that he does that other people haven't done and could have, but they just haven't for whatever reason. And I'm gonna love Malik down simply for that. I'm gonna love Blood at the Root down simply for that. Because in a world where we get tweets like, well, some of us just have to write white characters so we can get our foot in the door. And then once we get our foot in the door, we'll make our characters Black. Or, some of us, we write our characters in predominantly white spaces because that was our reality. And that needs to be seen too. Okay, cool. Well, Ladarian chose to do something different, and he showed that there is a market for it and there is a value for it.
Now that
if you write it, they will read it.
Now that they're seeing there is a market for Black boy fantasies after Black men have been told for years that there is not, hopefully we will get more in the near future, because like I said, we're not really getting them, especially not based in our world. And a lot of times the men are kind of made to cater to female audience by writing girl characters.
You right, Blue. Come on. Black men, y'all writing?
Ryan is supposed to come out.
Come on.
Come back with the book next year.
Read it. I am tired of reading black boys through the eyes of black women, because y'all make me think y'all don't like them.
Yeah.
Truly. You make me think you do not like them. And I love black men and black boys. I have 5 brothers, 6 nephews, 2 godsons. Like I
said, I just want to shout out Sign of the Slayer again for giving us a black boy with swag in a YA.
And it's a fantasy where we're not celebrating black boys and loving on them like we are black girls. I don't like that. I don't. I want these stories just as much as I want the books with black girls on the cover. I want them just as much. I want to see them all. I want to read them all.
And as somebody who has a nephew, I want him to be able to find black books as he grows up. Like, it shouldn't be that he goes from
I don't want to have to give him Bud Not Buddy.
And then once he gets to YA, he has to just immediately leap into adult stories without like a proper transition.
Cav, get to writing. Get to writing. Get to writing.
Oh yes, sorry. It is Sign of the Slayer. It is by Sharina Harris. It's like a vampire slayer, black, like Buffy the Vampire inspired type of story about a black girl. She's a band girl too, and she ends up getting mixed up in this situation where she discovers vampires, and she has to go to this specialized school and kind of becomes a special agent of, like, as a part of this big collective of people who slay vampires. There's also a vampire prince who is one of the other POVs in the story.
I like that I'm starting to publish books for black boys now for my nephew in the future. I hope it influences the publishing world for the better. Truly. Truly, truly, truly. All right. We got any final thoughts? So welcome. So welcome.
Oh, yeah. And one more time for the people, also pick up Never Rape by Shakira Khan, because this book was so under promoted by his publisher. I literally did not know that it was coming out until like 2 weeks before, and I rushed to them and I said, can I have a copy? And it came out the same day as Sign of the Slayer. Like, they put 2 black books out on the same day when they could have given them separate dates, and they just combined like some of their author events. And I didn't hear a lot about this one, and I'm still not hearing people really talk about it. So I'd love for more people to pick it up and discuss. And it's on
more options too. Oh, okay. I'll tell you. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. All right, y'all. Well, we left y'all with some recommendations for y'all to be able to check out. Thank y'all for coming through. I appreciate y'all again. Remember to check out Blood at the Root by Ladarian Williams.
And if you haven't read it yet, which I'm sure you did, if you at least started when you came to this live, like, go ahead and maybe try switching to the audio if you're having trouble reading it physically.
Again, I stand by the audiobook is how I read it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's Jalen Hall. I feel like he does a really good job reading it. I think that's his name. He did a really, really good job reading it, and it was just a great performance. I think you guys will love it. I'm sorry, Dama. Yeah. We just wrapping up the discussion now, but it will be on Vena's YouTube, so you can go see it on her YouTube. Yeah, no, they both sound really good. I definitely am waiting for Never Rape to come in, but I'm gonna check out Sign of the Slayer as well. Thank you, Vena, for being patient with me while I got my read finished, and for being willing to host this with me.
Thank you for having this discussion. It needed to be had.
You know, we've been having it in private for a month now, so I was ready. So again, thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate y'all. We will see y'all next time. Y'all have a great rest of y'all night. Bye.